Lisa, it's been a hell of a journey. You ready to do this?
Let's go.
All right, let's have some fun.
All right, Paton, so I think I'd love to start out and find out what possessed you to write a book about process that is targeted for entrepreneurs and particularly visionaries.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been asked many times, including several times by intimate members of my family. So number one, it's just a fact that if you're trying to grow and scale a business of any size, at some point, you've got to get everybody in your organization doing the most important things the right and best way every time. And while you can do that without strengthening your process component in a company with 1 or 5 or 10 people in it, you just can't do that without process in a company that's much bigger than that. And so it's just really important for entrepreneurs who want to accomplish a vision. Number two, most entrepreneurs are not naturally excited about strengthening their process component or doing process work for a variety of reasons we can talk about later. But because it doesn't come naturally to them and it's not something they have any passion for, I felt like there was a need to teach and motivate and inspire people to do this work that didn't exist in the world. And that's the third reason. I searched high and low for a book about process work and couldn't find anything that would appeal to a high level, 30,000 foot view visionary entrepreneur and would excite that person about doing this important work. And so that's what motivated me to start the project.
I love that.
So I'll reply by asking you why the hell you decided to join me in this crazy journey and write the book with me.
Absolutely. I think it ties into your reasons. And so I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, and I actually ended up understanding how small and medium-sized businesses, the struggles they go through. And so we, as I became an adult, I ended up going to law school and working with Fortune 500 companies, but I really missed the energy and the spirit of the entrepreneurial life. So I joined a startup that our family had launched, and we had plans to change like the perspective that people have about the construction industry throughout the country. And so we grew through we learned different tools through EO and YPO. And along the way, we got a copy of the book Traction, and it really made a difference for our organization. And so in my journey in working with our family's business, and as we continue to grow, we tried to document our own processes along the way. I kind of was obsessed with it because I had seen the value or actually I'd seen the costs of not having process in businesses. And so when we had our own business and we were growing throughout the country, I realized we need to document our processes, and did it on my own, did it every way wrong you could possibly do it. I didn't engage the leadership team. I made a process binder that was, hundreds and hundreds of pages that no one frankly ever even used or looked at, even though it was beautiful. And so along the way, about 8 years ago, I got a copy of the book Traction and drove right into the process component and saw this simple approach that Traction took when it came to documenting processes, a really high level approach and we implemented that in our own business, and it made a huge difference.
And it's that story that you told me when we were talking about working together that really excited me about this project. So I'm glad we're here today.
Absolutely, and particularly because I know the pain that comes when you don't have your processes in place and when you're not running on an operating system. And I think that's reason number 4 of why I wanted to join you and why we wrote this book is just we want people not to be in so much pain anymore when they're running their businesses and to experience the upside of their business.
Yeah, so it's universal, right? Like if you mention process in a room full of entrepreneurs, you're going to see a lot of people checking their watches, okay? And looking for where the exit is, because if we're going to talk about process for the next 30 minutes, I'm out of here.
Right, or their eyes filling up with tears.
And it's just consistent, and it's consistent with our clients, and it's consistent within the EOS implementer community. I mean, if you ask the EOS implementers to spend time on process, they want to talk about vision, they want to talk about people, even data, but process, because we're successful entrepreneurs and we love creating something new and building something from scratch and disrupting and creating and innovating and all of those things. And so what I found in researching this book is there are 3 root causes of that common anti-process bias. And I believe, and you share this belief, that these are myths that we need to change people's minds about. And there are 3 things. So number 1, as an entrepreneur, I'm not naturally process oriented is a very common piece of pushback we get. And what I've come to believe is that all humans, and especially successful entrepreneurs, are in fact naturally process oriented. Number two, working on process takes too much time and creates too much complexity, and we just don't have that time. We've got other more important things to do. And we're going to bust that myth with this book as well. And then the third thing is that the common belief is that a company that works hard to document and simplify its core processes is going to inhibit independent thinking, creativity, innovation. It's going to make me and the other people in my organization feel less free and incapable of making up their own minds. And that's just flat out wrong. So that's where it comes from, in my opinion. Did I miss anything? Do you have anything to add?
I think it's perfect. I think the reality is that once we embrace process and once our leaders embrace process, they actually find the reverse of every one of those myths. And so we found, and when we've spoken with our clients and even with our other EOS implementers, that, for example, someone believing they're not process oriented. And in fact, we found that, and they realized when they started their business, right, that they actually are process oriented. They found what works. If a customer liked something, they would do more of that and repeat that. And they determined that's the right and best way to build the product or connect with the community or whatever it looked like. And so they did more of that. If a client was unhappy or they made less money, they did less of that. And maybe they didn't write it down, but they naturally found the way to kind of capture the best practices. And as they grow, we just have found that it's vital to start to write those things down so you can grow the people on your team.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because the conclusion is, because it comes naturally and instinctively to me, and I'm not pausing, I quit doing all the stuff that doesn't get great results, and I kind of automatically incorporate all the stuff that does get great results into my day-to-day actions. That's not process orientation to a typical entrepreneur. They're associating process orientation with writing everything down, training everybody, and then being rigid about compliance. And that's a corporation's, a big company or a government agency's definition of process orientation, not an entrepreneurial definition of process orientation. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about helping entrepreneurs channel that natural human orientation to do the most important things consistently well to build a successful business.
Exactly. And the great news is when we start to share this kind of the shift in mindset that's needed from leaders, all of a sudden you'll see people in your talks or our talks, and they'll nod their head and understand that they've either subconsciously embraced this this mentality or something. So
when it also leads us to the second thing we see most often is this perception that this work is going to take a bunch of time and cause everybody to halt their day-to-day activities. And again, in my view, that comes from this sort of view of what process work needs to look like, resulting in a 750-page SOP manual and a lot of all company meetings where people are told how to do things. And that's just not what we're teaching at all in this book. And so we actually came to believe that process saves time, and lack of process is what wastes time in a business.
Exactly. It's the lack of process and the time it takes to either rebuild a product or deal with customer complaints. I mean, in our business, when we didn't have processes in place, so much time was spent on trying to, what was the source of this problem, or how did someone do this in the field? And we didn't know because everyone was doing things their own way. So it's the lack of process that's causing kind of burning time, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't have that to spare.
Well, and that leads to the third myth, which is that it's process that will destroy freedom rather than a lack of process that has already destroyed freedom. And so talk about that. What's wrong about that viewpoint, and what do you teach in the book that helps an entrepreneur recognize that doing this work is actually going to make them feel more free?
We spent time talking about how the irony or the paradox of process, right? Where the discipline and consistency that's required to document your processes at the high level that we're discussing actually creates freedom, because it creates a bunch of benefits for a business.
What I notice is when there isn't process and you don't hire and retain the right people, you end up getting sucked into the day-to-day execution yourself as the entrepreneur. You're in the weeds, and so you don't have any time to innovate, create, grow, build important relationships, etc. That's why lack of process eats away at time and makes you feel less free. Most of our clients, when we start the EOS implementation journey, are spending way too much time in the day-to-day, and process is just a really important part of that journey.
And when it comes to the amount of time that it takes for documenting your processes, we found it takes about a year overall, just quarter by quarter working on documenting the processes, taking a few every 90 days, which we call rocks in the EOS world, but 90-day priorities. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But so that 1 year is going to go by. And if it's going by in a way that you're building your business and putting these processes in place, then the world you're living in of constantly putting out fires and dealing with the same customer complaints or retraining people or different people or filling down, all of that stuff starts to go away.
Yeah. It's like the development of any new habit. If you invest a little bit of time and endure a little bit of pain, the freedom you get for the long term is exponential. So Lisa, we've been talking about EOS in our conversation, and it dawned on me that we haven't fully explained what that is. And so for the people who may not be familiar with the entrepreneurial operating system, high level, what is it?
Sure. So EOS is a set of simple concepts and tools that entrepreneurial companies can use. It teaches them a way of operating their business using a proven approach. Every organization has a way of operating, and this EOS system is a way that's been proven out in tens of thousands of organizations to help them run their business better so they can, we say, not only run a better business, but live a better life.
So Lisa, what role does process play in a company that's implementing EOS?
When we work with companies that are implementing EOS, we teach them how to strengthen each of the 6 key components of their business, and process is just one of those components. We have the vision component, the people component, the data component, the issues component, and then the process component and the traction component. And neither is more important than the other. They all work together that help turn a company from a good company into a great company.
Yeah, great answer, and a reminder of why we were both passionate about writing this book, because we both noticed, and when we had our initial conversations about this, our clients who have been working with us for somewhere between 1 and 5 years are really good and very passionate about strengthening 5 of those 6 key components. And where we get resistance, and maybe have a little resistance ourselves, is when we do the process work, for all the reasons we've already talked about in this conversation. And so our mission in writing this book is just helping entrepreneurs and their leadership teams add equal weight to and importance to that 6th key component, because it's the 6 together that transform an entrepreneurial company and allow its leadership team to achieve the company's vision.
And I know even as we were writing the book, I started to see everything through this lens of process, understandably. And at a point, we realized that even EOS is just a process for operating your business.
That's exactly right. And IDSing an issue is just a process for getting to the root and really solving that issue. And what we're really teaching is process, but it all blends together with the other 5.
And even the book Traction is like a
walks you through a process.
It's
exactly.
a written process for operating your business. So yeah, that's excellent.
That's awesome. What we've talked about the lack of enthusiasm for process. What are we sharing in the book that you're most excited about because you think it's going to change the mindset of people who have an anti-process bias or aren't particularly enthusiastic about this work?
There is a lot. There's some companies that we work with that actually do have their processes documented, but they don't know how to get them followed by people on their teams. And so I think that's incredibly valuable. I think us just attacking the mindset that gets in the way of leaders and their teams committing to it is another super valuable tool for people that haven't started the process of documenting their processes.
Well, and I think we do a nice job of laying out all the benefits and costs of doing or not doing the process work, because I think it's easy to get lost.
Absolutely.
And disconnected from those things. My clients tend to focus on people and vision first, sometimes data first, but doing that process work can be so important in helping you attract and retain key people, in helping you grow faster, winning new business, in helping you maintain and grow existing relationships, and in helping you continue innovating if you're a product development company or needing to bring new products to the market day in and day out. There's just so many benefits that help an entrepreneurial company achieve its vision that we don't always ascribe to process improvement work. And so that's what I'm excited about, is getting the people in that room to take it at least as seriously as all 5 of those other key components.
100%. And even if you aren't going to sell your business or even scale to some huge degree, I think once our clients start this work, they just realize the freedom that doing this work is going to give them. And that's certainly why I think a lot of people are EOS implementers, and why we do the work we do, is just that this gives them the freedom to have options, whether it's making more money, whether it's doing better than the competition, whether it's letting your leadership team have the ability to manage people instead of constantly just going back and either filling down in their roles or stuff like that. So
yeah, couldn't agree more.
So Paton, let's stick with thinking about the leaders and entrepreneurs, and let's dive a little bit deeper into the benefits and costs of process.
Yeah. And here I want to talk to the people who are watching and considering reading this book and say, you and I have seen some amazing things, good, bad, and ugly, around process component. And so when we talk about costs, our clients who are struggling to attract and retain top talent right now, which is almost every business on the planet, can trace their struggles back to the lack of a great hiring process, to the lack of a great onboarding process. How good are you at helping the people you hire come into your organization and understand what their job is and what your culture's like and what cultural and behavioral norms are going to get them recognized as top contributors right away? That they're struggling because their managers haven't been properly trained on how to lead and manage in our unique organization, and they aren't spending enough time helping those new people get up to speed and become effective at their job. And that brings us to another cost associated with process. It's harder to train people if you as a leadership team haven't decided yourselves the right and best way to do everything. So now all of a sudden I'm a brand new employee and I'm trying to be really good at my job, and I go ask my boss, Lisa, how to go do my job. And Lisa gives me one answer, but then her boss gives me a different answer. Now who do I listen to? And these are the kinds of things we see all the time. Another great example is it's harder to decide what the real root cause of your issue is when your process component isn't weak. And we've seen this play out multiple times. So for example, a leadership team with 2 leaders who are constantly butting heads, and it feels to the integrator of that organization, the person running the day-to-day, like one of these 2 people has to go because they're never going to align around anything. They're never going to be on the same page. After an hour of very painful, emotion-filled conversation, everybody in the room realizes the only reason they're not getting along is because we've got a really important process, our HR process, that they're not clear on who's doing what and what their respective roles are. And once we clarify that, now these 2 people are on the same page. So it's story after story after story like that we're sharing. And I'll cede to you. I know you've got 10 of your own. Give us another couple of stories that illustrate what the benefits and cost of doing this work are.
That absolutely reminds me of a story about happier customers, and that's another benefit of process. I worked with an organization that was a residential remodel company, and someone in the organization noticed that customers at the end of a remodel project would have their own celebration, invite guests, and actually invite people from the company. And somebody on our team said, why don't we incorporate that into our process? And so they added to their closing process for when a project finished, where they would throw a celebration for clients, and they would be the ones to bring the food and bring the drink and get the customer list, get the invite list for people that would attend, and have a great celebration. And not only did it make customers either willing to introduce the company to their neighbors and their friends, but just create overall higher client satisfaction, higher surveys, higher referrals, all that great stuff that comes from better processes.
The company became a partner to the client's joy about having a project finished, And my guess is the people in the neighborhood that attended the party became prospective customers
100%.
themselves. So it also helps you grow your business faster because you're generating more referrals and more new leads. And that's the kind of stuff we hear over and over and over again. One other story I like to tell about recognizable business disruption. One of the benefits we talk about is doing process work will help you stay one step ahead of your competition, and not doing process work risks you becoming obsolete as a business because good is the enemy of great. And so it's the story of what's happened to transportation, on-call transportation, in the last 25 years all across the world. 25 years ago, if you wanted transportation in an urban location to get from one place to another, you either rented a car or took a taxi. And because taxi companies in many urban settings were borderline monopolies, the quality of service, the quality of experience for the driver, the quality of experience for the passenger was terribly low. And two people who had that negative experience themselves started Uber. And they started Uber because they tried to get a cab late at night after a big event and ended up having to spend $800 finding a limo company to take them home because they couldn't get a cab to come pick them up. And all of a sudden, Uber and Lyft and all the other ride-sharing applications disrupted that entire industry to the point where it used to cost $1.8 million to buy a medallion for a cab license in New York City, and today it's $180,000. That is disruptive technology and disruptive process change that makes you become obsolete if you're not constantly reimagining and reinventing the way you do things to serve your customers. Yeah, so we've spent a good deal of time talking about mindset change and real commitment to this work. So once that happens for a leadership team, what is it that we teach that helps an entrepreneurial company's leadership team strengthen their process component?
Yeah, we did a good job, I believe, of boiling it down to 7 simple steps. There's 2 EOS tools that we use. The first is the 3-step process documenter, which has 3 sub-steps, and then the second tool is the Fba Checklist, and that has 4 sub-steps as well.
Yeah, and we struggled to come up with a memorable name for that process and settled on the process.
The process. Yeah. Which we're pretty proud of. But,
we are pretty proud of that. Obviously, the creative minds are just going off half-cocked. But it is very simple. It is very high level. And our purpose here is helping people say, you know, this isn't going to take a whole lot of time. This is something that we can do high level and provide a little bit of guidance without impinging on the entrepreneurial freedom we want people to have within our organization. And I think that's where I'm most excited about the impact we're going to be able to have.
Yeah, we even spoke with companies that had adopted more complex approaches to documenting their processes. They used Lean or Six Sigma or other business process management tools. And even some of those companies indicated when they became EOS companies that this helped them even take advantage of maybe the really complex work they had created before so it was usable for their teams.
That's right. I've got a client that's required to be ISO 9000 certified for their desire to serve a particular type of clientele, and they find the high-level process work we're teaching a really helpful executive summary of all their more detailed processes that are there for certification purposes. So let's walk through the 3-step process documenter in a little more detail. What are the 3 steps, and what are we teaching with those 3 steps that make them accessible for an entrepreneur and his or her leadership team?
Sure. So as you mentioned, the first tool is the 3-step process documenter. And the first step in that is we teach our teams how to identify a handful of core processes. The way this looks is we have our leaders get in a room. So a leadership team of, let's say, 3 to 7 people get in a room, and we have them identify a handful of core processes, high level. So we use an approach called the 20-80 approach, identifying 20% of the steps that'll get them 80% of the way there. Not every step, and there are some people that are more inclined to make things a lot more complicated and want a lot of detail. And we just encourage them, just hold on, we don't need that at this point. Because what happens when you do that is then you end up not getting anything done. So, and I'm frankly a person that loves a lot of detail, so I really appreciate it. But this approach actually lets you get the work done and into people's hands so they can use it.
The inverse of the 20/80 approach are the people or the teams or the organizations that feel like they need to document 100% of the steps to get, in 100% of the processes to get 100% compliance. And the problem with that is twofold. Number one, the work never gets done because that's such a mountain of effort. And number two, once it is done, it's so unwieldy that it's very unfriendly and people don't tend to use those things. And so we're kind of focused on what are the handful of things we need to do the right and best way every time that make us uniquely valuable to our customers and our employees. And let's just document and simplify those things, not everything. So my favorite example of that is the CFO who, when we did this identify exercise, listed 17 distinct accounting processes that we put on the whiteboard when the mission was to identify the 5 to 12 core processes for the whole business that we needed to document and simplify. It was invoicing process and AP process and AR process and all that crazy stuff. And those are just steps or sub-steps in one accounting process in most entrepreneurial companies. And that's the way I like to illustrate this for people who are learning this for the first time.
So the way we train our teams, and the book sets us out as well, as we give examples that every organization has an HR process, how you bring people in the door. Every organization has a marketing process and a sales process. You may have a handful of operations processes. Most organizations should or have a finance process or an accounting process, customer service process, and even a process for how you run the business. And so we give our teams those examples, and then we give them 5 quiet minutes to draft what they think their core processes are, what they think is the sweet spot, makes their organization unique.
Yeah. And what we're teaching here is let's systemize the predictable stuff, the stuff we have to do the right and best way every time, so we can humanize the exceptional, so we can elevate above the tactics and the day-to-day basics and really create memorable experiences with the free time that we get when we don't have to be stuck in the weeds. That's a great quotation from Izzy Sharp, who was the founder of Four Seasons Hotel, and he built his entire hospitality reputation on that approach to managing people and running an organization.
So this step with identifying your core processes, as I said, it takes about an hour. And what we have our teams do is get in a room, everyone identifies their core processes, their thoughts of what they think their core processes are. And then we do an exercise we call Keep, Kill, and Combine, where we have everyone share their thoughts, we brainstorm, and then we land at between, as you mentioned, 5 and 12 core processes.
Yeah, it takes about an hour. But usually there's spirited debate and a lot of changes. And when we're done, everybody says, yep, if we could get those 5 to 12 things consistently followed, we'd be strengthening our process component. And so step 2 is document and simplify each of those 5 to 12 core processes. And so start walking us through how we teach people to document and simplify each of their core processes.
So we have a process champion, and it's the person that is going to oversee this whole project of getting your processes documented. And so as a leadership team, we determine in our identify stage, which processes are we going to tackle first? And so it may be we take on processes that maybe will just give you the most bang for your buck, the low-hanging fruit. Some teams decide this is an area where we're really stuck, and they take the harder processes they want to approach because they know it's going to make a difference. It's up to the leadership team to decide. We decide on when it's going to be due as well. When we move to step 2, which is document and simplify, first we teach our teams how to observe just when whoever owns that process, and typically the person that's the owner of the process is the person who it makes sense on the accountability chart or an organizational chart for your organization. So for example, if it's your people process, it would be your HR person. So let's talk about the second step in the 3-step process documenter, which is document and simplify.
You bet. We've identified the core processes, leadership team on the same page. Now the team decides together in what order we're going to tackle this document and simplify work. And sometimes they decide they're going to take some low-hanging fruit and document and simplify the easy ones. Sometimes they're really struggling in an area and that becomes the first 1, 2, or 3 processes they document and simplify. It's up to every leadership team. Once they've made a decision to document and simplify the process, it's really important to identify the logical owner of that effort. Not the person who does all the work, but the person who's accountable for making sure that thing is done really well. And so, for example, if you have a people or talent or HR process, it's probably the person who's accountable for ensuring we treat people well in our organization, the HR director, VP of HR, whatever it happens to be. And so that person follows a very simple process for documenting and simplifying everything that has to do with attracting and retaining talent in our organization. And so step one in that process is take some time to observe the way we do these things now. Just observe. We are all running so hard in business today that if we don't stop and pay attention to what's working and not working right now, we can't really do this work particularly well. It's not a race to the finish. It's a let's notice what's working and not working, take notes and observe. Once you've got a long list of observations about how we treat people, then you evaluate what's working and what's not working. You make some judgment calls, and that's where you start looking for ways to simplify the process. Simplifying means focusing on clarity, the minimum number of steps, more automated than not, if possible, to achieve a desired result. And so this is where our leaders or process owners are looking for ways to eliminate unnecessary steps, eliminate redundancies where two people do the same task in different departments. They're looking for bottlenecks where things get stuck or take more time than they should. They're looking for things that are done manually today that could be automated with software or some sort of a machine or robot. And they're looking for places where we frequently drop the baton, where one person is expecting another person to do something and nothing really happens. And so that is how you simplify a core process. Once you've done all that evaluation and you've found ways to simplify, then you're able to propose a draft core process to the rest of your leadership team. And this is the step that gets skipped in a lot of organizations. We believe and we teach with passion that if you don't have the entire leadership team agreeing this is the right and best way to attract and retain talent in our organization or market in our organization or sell things in our organization, then it's going to be very difficult for you to use the Fba Checklist, which we teach as the second tool, because you don't have the backs of one another on your leadership team. And so the last step is getting the leadership team to review and approve that core process that's been documented and simplified.
Excellent. Excellent. I even have clients who have shared that they didn't have an HR process, for example, so they would post a job on whatever job posting board or whatever they had it, and but they didn't have a process for who was going to interview the candidate, or who's going to take care of that person the first day they started, or what is the training look like for people to understand how the other parts of the organization worked. And so having this in place, especially in this time where it's so hard to bring people in the door or retain them, or when you are working remotely, is vital, because the right hand has to know what the left hand is doing.
Yeah, and one of the things we teach when we're documenting and simplifying is you've got to identify the who, what, where, when, and how. So sometimes creating the proper context for your people about why we do
Absolutely.
things the way we do and what result we're trying to get is as important as documenting the exact right way to do it, because that creates buy-in and enthusiasm and passion on your team.
And even respect for how other departments work. I remember in a finance department that we were working with, the rest of the organization didn't understand the need for approvals happening by a certain day of invoices or billing. And once they understood, once the finance process or the accounting process was documented, and other departments understood the need for billing deadlines and approval deadlines, it made everyone respect the work that was happening in all departments and gave each other appreciation for each other. So
exactly right. Great example. So let's talk about step 3, package. To be honest with you, when I first read that in the 3-step process documenter 16 years ago, I said, how's that a whole step? That doesn't sound very complicated, but there's a lot of nuance and importance there, and walk us through that if you would.
I think a great example of this came up when we were speaking with one of our clients, and they were talking about the fact that they actually had their processes packaged, but nobody knew where they were. And so they actually had an internal an intranet for their organization. And the founder didn't know that all of their processes had been documented because they were just sitting there in this beautiful package that no one knew. So what package means is so crucial because a lot of companies do the work of documenting their processes, but no one knows where to find them. Or they're all over they're online in different file folders. What we mean when we talk about packaging is so that they are easy to find and use. And so there's a couple of pieces to packaging. First of all, we have to decide what is the best format for the people that are going to use the document. So
right, we're not writing them, we're not creating them for us on the leadership team. We're creating them for the people who are going to use them every day, and we've got to think about that.
For the end user, absolutely. So if someone's going to be out of the office, maybe having it packaged digitally, or so they can use it on their phone. Maybe that's the best package. People that are at their desks, maybe it means that online, but not an app, but maybe some website is the best place to have it. You've seen even a simple examples in a fast food area where people have, a printed page that has just pictures that maybe people that speak different languages, everyone can understand what the process looks like based on the illustration. So the format really matters based on the end user, and that's who you're packaging it for.
Yeah, locate the tool you're using to teach people the basics as close to the work as possible in a format that everybody who does that job can easily understand and rely on in the heat of battle, and not feel like they need to go over to a credenza, whip out a manual, and page through 27 pages to figure out what they're supposed to make the cheeseburger look like when the darn thing is done. Put a picture right in front of them. Yeah, it's very simple, but really important work. And we've seen all kinds of formats from examples that our clients and other companies have shared with us. Walk through some of the ways you've seen processes packaged that are impactful.
Yeah, my clients are always surprised how simple it can be. We just overcomplicate it, I think, in our heads yet again. And so for using a software program, my clients have done screenshots just to show people how to use it. They've done YouTube video. They've done a video on their phone and uploaded it to a YouTube channel where easily people can access it. There's pretty low cost to doing that, including they've taken video of bloopers to show you what not to do as well. And so a lot of useful, there's free tools, and then there's tools that you can use that third-party software companies sell, whether they're learning management systems or other things to remind you, or gamification, the ways to make it fun to use the training or the documentation that you've created.
Easy to find and use is a must. Fun is a bonus because it increases the likelihood people are going to rely on these tools. And then this is a constantly evolving space. I mean, one of the articles we read in researching this book is there was a partnership between Ford Motor Company and Bosch to use virtual reality to train technicians on how to do repair work on a brand new all-electric vehicle that Ford was launching, and they didn't have the production capacity or the ability to ship brand new vehicles all over the world so that mechanics could work on the real thing. So they created a virtual reality program to do that. And I think that kind of thing is going to happen more and more and more as technology advances occur. So,
and there's even the more simple, which I didn't mention, is like there's checklists, and there's just as simple as can be is what we're looking for. Super high level, not complex detail that if you create it, no one's ever going to.
Nothing at all wrong with an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with a Word document and outline form that just walks you step by step. You just got to figure out what your audience is going to use most consistently.
Correct.
Great stuff. So that's the 3-step process documenter. When all your handful of core processes have been documented, simplified, and approved by your leadership team, and you've packaged them so they're all in a manual or some other location where they're easy to find and use, then we rely on the next EOS tool, and we call that the Fba Checklist, which stands for Followed by All Checklist. All right, Lisa, we've walked through the 3-step process documenter. We've identified our handful of core processes, documented and simplified them. We've packaged them so they're easy to find and use. Now, what do we do to change behaviors in our organization? What's the tool we use for that?
Absolutely. So we move to the second tool, which is the Fba Checklist. FBA stands for Followed by All, and there are 4 steps to the Fba Checklist. The first one is train, then we measure, we manage, and we update. Do you want to tell us about train?
Yeah, this is all about behavior change, because what we've got to understand, what entrepreneurial leaders need to understand, is that left to our own devices as humans, we will revert to the old behavior. And so if you think you can create a process manual, show it to your people once, and they're magically going to start doing things differently tomorrow and getting vastly better results, that's just not going to happen. So let's talk training. Step one in the FBA checklist is training, and you got to train everybody who touches even one step in the process. You've got to touch people who are impacted by the way the process is being followed in other departments, because everybody being on the same page is critical to this effort. One of the questions we get a lot is, what kind of training, Paton? Is it classroom training? Is it on-the-job training? Is it ride-alongs? And the answer is whatever is going to most help your people understand why we need to do things differently and how to do things differently. So I'm a big fan of tailoring the training method to the unique nature of not only teams, but sometimes individuals. Most companies are full of some people who learn well in a classroom setting, some people who love learning online and watching videos of it, and some people who have to learn by doing. And so if you can cater the training method to the people you're training, that's always highly recommended. We also recommend not making these training programs rigid, bureaucratic, and dictatorship oriented. No command and control training. This is the way we're going to do things or you're fired. It's more interactive. It's more empathetic to the nature of the people you're training. It's involving them in the journey to understand why we do things differently. And I believe it needs to include an openness to tweaking or evolving your core processes as well. We have numerous clients between us who rolled out a new core process, and in the training they did with their people learned, oh my God, we inverted these 2 steps, or that step we used to do 3 years ago, but we don't do it that way anymore. And so just be willing to accept constructive feedback and pushback from your people when you're training them, because together you're going to make this stuff work. And so that's step one. Step two is about reinforcing training. And one of the best ways to reinforce training is with measurement. So walk us through measure as the second step in the FBA checklist.
Absolutely. So in order to reinforce the training that we just gave them, we measure. We measure what matters. And so there's a few things we can measure for. 3, we don't have to measure every step using these options. And the first one is compliance. So we measure to see, are people doing it right? So am I doing it right? For example, if you have someone that's required to wear safety goggles on the job, measuring for compliance would be, are they wearing safety goggles? The way we measure using our approach doesn't mean you need software to do it. You just walk around and see, are people wearing their safety goggles? Keep it simple. The second thing we can measure for is frequency. Am I doing it often enough to get the results that I want? So if you take an example of, let's say you need to sell, sell 2 projects a week. The frequency that you need to do that, maybe you need to send out 4 proposals each week. So am I sending out those 4 proposals to get to that ultimate result of 2? So am I doing it frequently enough to get the result using the process that we train them on? And the final thing we measure for is outcome. Am I getting the desired result? So am I getting those 2 projects or 2 jobs each week that I'm trying to, if I have a 2-week, if I'm trying to sell 2 jobs each week, am I hitting that desired result? And you're just measuring. The way you measure can either be on a company-wide scorecard or a departmental scorecard. So on a leadership team scorecard or a departmental scorecard.
Or an individual scorecard.
Or an individual scorecard, absolutely.
I find my clients who are strongest in the data component think first about what each member of each team needs to do every week to get consistently exceptional results, and then builds their departmental scorecards off of those thoughts. And so think about, what would be a sign my employee who does X is having a great week, and let's put that on a personal scorecard or an individual scorecard so they get feedback every week that they're kicking butt and taking names.
And particularly like people that love to be accountable and people that love to achieve results,
yeah, exactly.
They love to see, am I winning the game? And that's the scorecard that shows them, am I contributing in a way that's going to contribute to the overall success for the organization, or winning the game that I've set up for myself, or that my supervisor or manager set me up for as well.
Yeah, a couple of little nuggets on measure is, so first of all, there is always pushback on this idea. The feeling from most people when you say, hey, we're going to put a scorecard together to measure compliance, frequency, and outcome is, oh my God, you're just watching to catch me making a mistake, and as soon as I do, I'm fired. And there is a mindset change required here where you've got to help them understand that the scorecard is their thing. It's their tool to recognize when they're killing it and when they're struggling and ask for help. It's their tool to help them improve the way they're preparing or executing their job so they're getting consistently better results, because quite frankly, very few people on the planet want to come to work every day and get lousy results. And so these numbers really help them figure out on their own what they need to do differently and better. And a lot of times it takes a lot of pressure off the manager staff to do that work for them.
Yeah, and it helps them understand what the manager is paying attention to, which often I believe as well, people are trying to do their best, but this gives them an idea, an understanding of where they need to put their focus.
And so for the audience that is deeply steeped in EOS terminology, one of the things we found when we really teach measurement in the process component well is that the quality of your departmental and leadership team scorecards improves dramatically, because your core processes are the tool you need to find activities-based numbers that need to be measured on a weekly basis that predict future results. Compliance and frequency predicts future results, and so this is a tool to help you strengthen the data component as well as the process component. So now let's jump to step 3, manage, or what we say in EOS terminology, LMA, which stands for leadership, management, and accountability. Walk us through what we teach to help teams LMA, or make people accountable for following the process and getting great results.
Absolutely. So the manage step is so that people can be accountable for following the process and hold ourselves as leaders accountable for having people follow the process. And so leading means helping people understand the overall purpose so they can embrace the effort. If you lead your team in this approach, that they will embrace this and run with it in ways you can't even imagine, and actually have results bigger than you could have imagined. So, and then manage means to train, teach, and coach your people, and to repeat yourselves and really stand by their side so they can get the results that you want. Really be there for them to answer their questions, and just listen, and then adjust and do what you need to do to be patient to watch that change happen. We have said that sometimes leadership teams think they think that maybe process is going to fix all of their problems. And when something breaks down, it's not a problem with the process. It just means you have a tool to go back to help people be better and perform better in their jobs.
Awesome. Yeah, and one of the points we always like to make when we talk about this stuff is, you as a leader and manager shouldn't have to hold people accountable, and you're certainly not going to make anybody accountable who isn't naturally accountable. What we're teaching is, how do you lead and manage in a way where accountable people want to work with you and non-accountable people want to quit? That's LMA. And so when you establish accountability for following the process and getting desired results, what you're doing is you're rewarding progress. Hey, great job, you're getting it, keep it up, okay? You're recognizing excellence, high-fiving your people, providing recognition awards, compensating people who are really nailing it. You're redirecting the people who are struggling or failing by coaching and mentoring, and eventually replacing people who are never going to get it with people who can, because if you won't do that, the people who can do it well want to leave because they don't want to be treated the same way somebody who's failing at their job every day is treated. And so that is LMA. And what this does is it erodes the common problem with process initiatives or any behavior change initiative in an organization, which is the view that change is really hard and I'll consider changing after you go first. And so we've got to own it and change our behaviors, and that's what LMA, or managing people, requires. So fourth step is something we ask our leadership teams to do at least once a year, and that's update your documented simplified core process. And I'll just handle this. Once a year, we want you to pull out the process, review it carefully, observe the way it's working in your organization, look at the world because things may have changed with your customers, with your vendors, with technology, with what your competitors are doing, and look for additional ways to simplify, automate, or evolve each of your core processes. Then just repeat the document and simplify step one more time, get it approved by the leadership team, and restart the Fba checklist. Train, measure, manage, update. That Fba checklist as a cycle is the way an EOS company becomes a continuously improving machine that's constantly looking for ways to get better and innovate and evolve ahead of its competition.
And vital for update is we always understand who the owner is, and we always have a calendar tied to it so that we know and we can keep our processes updated. And some teams will update, them all. They'll pick certain processes to update throughout the quarter. Some teams may do it over the year, but there's different approaches, but it always involves a calendar and an owner to keep it alive.
We can't hold other people accountable if we're not clear and accountable ourselves.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. All right, so we've walked everybody through the tools. Let's be honest with the audience about the kinds of things that will derail this high-level, simple process we've just walked everybody through, because my biggest concern in this conversation is we don't want to make it sound like, you're going to instantly transform your organization tomorrow. So why does this project go off the rails? What are the obstacles?
First one is just lack of passion. And it could be among anybody. It could be us as the leadership team or even the visionary just loses passion over the concept. They forget why they were doing this in the first place. And so when that happens, we encourage them, go back and remember the benefits, remember why you started this mission in the first place. And then sometimes the leadership team themselves, they also forget. And so as a leader, you have to show up and reignite that passion. Like mostly how visionaries have this incredible passion, and use that passion to get everyone behind this approach.
That's great. I'm smiling because sometimes a visionary thinks he or she is being passionate about this stuff, but their attention spans can be pretty short for process work. And so the rest of the team is just getting started on the document and simplify stage, and the visionary thinks we should be done already. And so that's a way it appears you're losing passion when really you haven't. You just can't understand why it's not done 90 days from the day we first started talking about it. So the second one is a reluctance to own this work at the leadership level. And so for me, this takes a couple of different forms. Number one, we as a leadership team want to delegate this to somebody in the trenches to do the work. So we got to document and simplify our sales process. Let's ask our very best seller to go do that. And there's a million reasons we go through in the book why that's a bad idea. Involve them, yes. Abdicate ownership of the project to them, terrible idea, okay? The other way I see this done is we think we're going to outsource process work. Let's hire a process consultant to come in and do all the heavy lifting for us, and we'll just be observers. And while I believe if you lack process expertise, it's helpful to hire in or outsource process expertise, that person should be a team member and an educator of your leadership team, not the person who's doing all the work, because your team members will follow the people doing the work. And if they see that it's not important enough for you to be directly involved in the effort, they're not going to listen to a consultant. You gotta own it.
Right. Another obstacle we run into is just people that love complexity or love attention to detail. I thought it'd be great for me to mention this one again to call myself out. And when I bring up my process binder, there's a lot of nodding heads in the room of operational people who have done the same thing in their companies. And so this approach that we take, the 2080 approach, a high-level approach, it is what makes this work. It's such a key part to the magic of this, because when it's high level, people will use it. You can keep it updated. In an entrepreneurial company, things are changing and you're growing so quickly, it allows you to keep it relevant for the whole organization and accessible.
Yeah, and every entrepreneurial company has at least one lover of complexity on it and one person who any more than 3 bullet points is too much detail. And so what my recommendation to you and your leadership team is just lean into that. Value the complexity, because those people make sure we don't miss anything, but resist the temptation to document 100% of the steps and 100% of your processes. We'll get there later. Keep it high level. And this is related to the next obstacle we see a lot, which is perfectionism, the desire to never roll it out until it's exactly perfect. And so on a personal wellness journey rather than a business process, this is the person who doesn't want to start losing 25 pounds until he or she has found exactly the right gym and exactly the right personal trainer and exactly the right nutritionist and exactly the right things. And so I'll get to it. I'm going to get to it eventually. And 5 years later, you're still waiting to start your personal wellness journey when if you'd have just committed to writing down everything you eat every day and exercising for 30 minutes 5 times a week and stepping on the scale once a week, there's your personal wellness process. Get started with that. Perfectionism can come later. So don't wait to launch until you've got it exactly right. Your core processes will iterate over time.
Yep, absolutely. We say but perfectionism is the enemy of done, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Some organizations also think that technology is going to take care of it. I love technology. There's so many great apps and software. I love all that stuff. But until you as a company understand what your processes are, that technology is not going to be able to help you. And even if you take, whether it's I won't mention names, whatever technology you pick, you're still going to have to do the work first. And then absolutely, if it makes sense for your company, you can pull some technology in to help you make it easier to get it out to people or whatever, but you still have to do the work initially.
Yeah, we see this in CRM implementations and ERP
Absolutely.
implementations using a couple technology acronyms there, but the company that thinks a CRM implementation is going to document and simplify your sales and customer service processes are going to fail 100% of the time.
And they're going to waste a lot of money.
That's exactly right. And even the people who sell CRM systems say this system works best if you tell us your preferred way of selling, marketing, and managing relationships with your client, and we can configure the software around that process. And so that's what we're talking about there. Just get your processes baked first and then use technology to accelerate and regulate adherence to core process.
Payne, there are a lot of obstacles and challenges, and when we list out a lot of them, and the main point is to teach teams that you are going to run into a wall, but and that you can overcome them, and just to recognize them. But I want you to share one of them about the kind of syndrome.
Yeah. So to wrap this all up, we're not trying to scare you away if you're watching this conversation. We just want you to know you're normal and push through these obstacles, because these are going to come up in every process iteration we've seen. And so a couple of others before I get to the kind of syndrome is ineffective training. That derails a lot of process initiatives. You do all the other work well, and then you don't take the time to properly train your people. Ineffective leadership and management. There's a bunch of great suggestions for how to get better at that. Read the book, How to Be a Great Boss by Gino Wickman and Renee Bohr to get better at that. And a lack of accountability at the leadership level or down in your organization. And again, LMA is the solve to that. And so get better at leading and managing. But the kind of syndrome is one we see a lot, we have fun with. And so this comes from the question in the organizational checkup that an EOS company takes once a year about process. And it's question number 16. And it basically asks, our core processes have been documented, simplified, are being followed by all, and consistently produce the results we want. And our clients answer that question with a range of scores from 1 to 5, with 5 being, yes, we're really good at that. And a lot of our clients auto-check the 4 or 5 box. And then when we ask them the specifics in breaking that question down, so would you say your core processes have been documented and simplified? Well, kind of. So can anybody produce the process manual or the tool you've used to do that? Well, not really. Okay. Well, did the leadership team approve those core processes? Well, kind of. I mean, we're kind of all on the same page. And did you conduct training? Are you measuring? Are you managing? And it's kind of. And at the end of the day, kind of will kill you with this work. You've got to do the work. It's like anything. And what really irritates me is nobody knows more than an entrepreneur. That you never get anything unless you're willing to do the work. And yet when it comes to process, you think somehow magically you can do nothing and check that 4 or 5 box and you're gonna get consistently exceptional results, and you can't. So my passionate plea to the people watching this is, please read the book, get your mindset right, learn what you need to learn to go document and simplify your core processes, get them followed by all, and install a machine for ensuring you're consistently better and stronger and faster than the competition, and you'll achieve the results you want. But if you won't do the work and you're kind of doing this stuff, please, I beg you, do the work. That's all I've got to say on that subject, and I think that's all we've got to share with our audience, other than thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for helping me work with you to put out a great book that we hope helps lots of people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paton. It's been just a pleasure working with you on this, and I appreciate our friendship that we've developed along the way too. So if anything we share today resonates with you, we'd love for you to find out more. So you can visit eosworldwide.com, you can download a free chapter and download some of the tools we spoke about. We appreciate your time today, and if we can do anything to support you, let us know.